So, good night to everyone. So, we're going to be starting chapter 7.1. And to get us started, basically in this chapter, common spreadsheet features. So, in chapter 7.1, that was basically giving you an idea as to what is spreadsheet, what spreadsheet looks like, and the parts of a spreadsheet in terms of the software and so on. That's the this is like introduction to spreadsheet basically. We're not really focused on using it until later chapters. Chapter 2 is also basically kind of like an introduction also. We are still teaching you some theory, some terms, terminologies that you need to know and remember, that you need to understand what they are. So for instance, you need to know what is an active cell. You need to know what are the types of data in a spreadsheet. You need to know how to format and what is formatting. You need to know what is formulae, what is functions, what is autofill, what are cell ranges, title lock-in, and so on. Some features of spreadsheets we'll be looking at. So, to get us started with the chapter, we'll be looking at the very first paragraph. Now, these three paragraphs here have quite a few terms and definitions that you need to take note of. So the paragraph reads, people generally use the terms spreadsheet and worksheet interchangeably. So if we have a spreadsheet open, this general area that you're seeing here, where you're seeing all of the rows and columns and the intersection of cells, you can either call that the spreadsheet or the worksheet. Either term can be used. However, to be consistent with Microsoft, this is what Microsoft is saying and other publishers, we shall use the term worksheet to refer to the rows and columns where you place your calculations, and the term spreadsheet to mean the type of computer application or file such as Excel. So basically, the term spreadsheet and worksheet can be used interchangeably. So that's your first point there. Your second point is that based on Microsoft, what they are looking at is that worksheet can refer to the rows and columns, whereas spreadsheet is going to refer to the software. So whatever application that is a spreadsheet application that basically has rows and columns that allows you to do calculation, that they are calling the spreadsheet. The two of you clear enough?
No, sir. Could you please roll back?
Which part? Everything?
The whole thing.
Alright. So, we have a term called spreadsheet and worksheet. Now, spreadsheet, what? You guys are in business, right?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So you should know for accounts, you would have to do up a ledger and you have accounts table and all of that, right? Right?
No.
Yeah.
You're supposed to know that. But if you don't know, in accounts, we have documents called ledgers and what are the rest, Nathan? Profit and loss, something. You have different documents, and they're gonna have like different layouts, and having these rows and columns are actually beneficial for those accounting documents basically. So instead of preparing those documents physically, we are now doing it in a software. We're now using a software to carry out those tasks. So to facilitate that, we created columns and rows, whereby you can use any cell, make it larger, make it smaller to put in your information to do your calculation. So this entire area here, all of these rows and columns where you can enter your number in your calculation, we call that spreadsheet or worksheet. Either term can work for it. Clear on that?
Yes, sir.
You sure you're clear?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So spreadsheet and worksheet, this refers to this entire area here. So if I zoom out as far as I can, all of this area here that you can't even see, all of that is part of the spreadsheet or the worksheet area. So that's the two terms there. Now Microsoft, the company Microsoft and other companies, they're basically differentiating. They're putting a difference between the term worksheet and spreadsheet. They're viewing it as two different words. They are saying that the term worksheet is going to refer to the rows and columns. So they're saying that worksheet is going to be the rows and columns. So that's what you're seeing on the screen right now. All of these rows and columns, they're calling that the worksheet. Clear, Amelina?
Yes, sir.
Good. Now, so that's where you place your calculations, right? You put your numbers, your formulas, and so on. Now, excuse me. Now, what are they calling the spreadsheet? The term spreadsheet. It's not the same as worksheet anymore in terms for Microsoft. They're calling spreadsheet the application, the file. So this program, this entire software that I have open, that I'm currently dragging right now, this entire software here, this entire program, they're calling the spreadsheet. If you are to save this file on your computer and you go to wherever you save this file, like for instance here, look at the let me put it in a location where you can see it properly. Yes, I got one spreadsheet file at the bottom here. So this file that you're seeing at the bottom here, that's what we call a spreadsheet file. So according to Microsoft, we would call that a spreadsheet file, not a worksheet file. So that is basically,
So,
yeah, go ahead.
basically just here, right?
Uh-huh.
You could call the rows and column worksheet or spreadsheet, right?
Good.
In reality, it's same spreadsheet and worksheet, and the Microsoft thing when you say is worksheet alone.
Yes. So in Microsoft,
Why can't I just choose one?
huh?
So why we just can't choose one?
Because they wanted to differentiate it. They want to like place a difference between the two. Because if you think about it, if somebody says spreadsheet, if somebody say the word spreadsheet, you might not know exactly what they're referring to. Are they referring to the entire file? Are they referring to the software? Or are they referring to a sheet inside of the spreadsheet? Remember, we got different sheets also, right? So what exactly are they referring to? So that maybe that's why they want to differentiate it. So, but if you think about it, the term worksheet, don't you think that's a bit more applicable? It's a bit more related to it actually being a sheet, worksheet.
Yeah.
Yeah, the term worksheet actually, it kind of relates more to it being a sheet, because actually later on, not later on, like right now, The next term we're looking at is a term called workbook. So the term workbook actually refers to a collection of worksheets. So I hope now you can see why they were trying to differentiate it. They want persons to understand that the entire file could be called a workbook. So to make things similar now, we call the individual sheets worksheets. So but let me go back to spreadsheet. They're referring to spreadsheet as the program or file. So Microsoft is calling the worksheet the rows and columns, and the spreadsheet the program and file. But realistically, you can actually spreadsheet of worksheet can refer to both. Can refer to both columns and rows and the program file. But Microsoft is differentiating it. But as I just mentioned, we have the term workbook, and that is basically a collection of worksheets and chart sheets. Carry that up. Yeah. The workbook is a collection of worksheets and chart sheets. So let me just read you the paragraph. Most of the Excel screen is devoted to the display of the workbook, which can contain one or more chart sheets, worksheet or chart sheet. We shall refer to sheets to represent worksheet or chart sheet. So as I said, there's a lot of terms here. I'm going to try to write them down here so that you can see them. Let me take out that from bold so that you can see the terms clearly. Yeah. So worksheet and chart sheet referring to both rows and columns. Microsoft is referring to worksheet as the rows and column. Spreadsheet is referring to the file or program. And workbook is going to refer to the entire collection of worksheet and chart sheet. So based on this definition here now, you would note that each sheet that you see at the bottom here, sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3, sheet 4, and so on, they are the worksheet. So sheet 1 is basically worksheet 1. Sheet 2 is going to be worksheet 2. Sheet 3 is going to be worksheet 3. So I want you to think of spreadsheet as being a book. Think of spreadsheet as basically being a book, and it has different pages inside of this book here. But these pages, we call them worksheets, and we call the entire book a workbook. You guys following so far?
Yes, sir.
Amelina,
Yes, sir.
any other questions?
Yeah.
Mhm.
If we're ever given like a question in theory and we're asked like to identify the name or the rows and columns, so we just call it like spreadsheet or worksheet, or just we use the correct one, the correct name.
What
Or we can
exactly?
just
Is it all two of them correct?
Can you repeat the question?
okay, like in like a question in theory.
Mhm.
If we're given to like label, let's say the worksheet, like we're supposed to call the worksheet or spreadsheet. So we
Mhm.
use both in like a question, or we have to give it the correct name.
Yeah, you can use both. I would allow both.
Okay, sir.
But what I would recommend is that you more use the word worksheet, just in case, to save yourself. Because that's what we're trying to understand right now. That yes, the terms can be used interchangeably, but they're looking at the term worksheet as more referring to the sheet. and whereas spreadsheet is more referring to the program. But even though they can be used interchangeably, still try to remember that worksheet is more of the sheet, and hopefully if you do use spreadsheet, if it's not my exam or somebody else's exam, they might give you the mark, hopefully.
Okay, sir.
Any other questions? All right.
No.
So, what terms do we have so far? We have spreadsheet, we have worksheet, we have workbook, and we have the term sheet. So just plain sheet. Let me put them outside here so that you can see them better. We have spreadsheet, worksheet, workbook, and sheet. So 4 terms we have so far, and we also have chart sheet. 5. So, what is a sheet?
Sir, wait. I'm confused.
Mm-hmm.
Worksheet is the rows and column.
Good.
Sheet is worksheet. So sheet is basically rows and column as well.
Right. But it's not like a name, like how worksheet is a name, or chart sheet is a name, or spreadsheet is a name. It's like more of a shortened word. It's like instead of calling it worksheet, instead of calling it spreadsheet, you simply use the word sheet. It's like you give it a nickname then, basically. Did you understand?
So to be less confusing, we could just like forget about sheet.
Yeah, you could. But you're gonna realize just that when you're talking to your friend or talking to somebody, you can literally say, "Look at this sheet," instead of saying, "Look at this worksheet." You yourself can use the shortened word, and then you can realize that it's actually being used. You can get accustomed to it. Don't worry, but just know what it means. That's all. So 5 terms so far. So we clear on these first 4: spreadsheet, worksheet, workbook, and sheet. Are we fully clear on them?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good. Now the next term is chart sheet. What basically is a chart sheet? Now, what I'm about to do, you don't have to understand what I'm about to do. Later on, you're gonna learn about it, and I'm not gonna explain what I'm doing right now because I don't need to explain this right now. But basically, what I'm doing, I'm creating a chart. But that's not important right now. What I'm trying to help you to understand is what is a chart sheet. So we have a chart here now. Now this chart, we can move this chart. Like I said, don't worry with what I'm doing. We're just trying to understand what's a chart sheet right now. So I'm moving this chart to a sheet. Now, what you're currently seeing is called a chart sheet. Do you see any difference between... Alright, that's okay. Do you see any difference between this sheet here and a regular sheet? What's the difference between the two?
One of them is shown on a bar graph.
Any other difference? It's pretty obvious. Very obvious.
One of them, the girls is higher.
One of them...
The girls are the larger number.
No, we're talking about the chart. I'm not talking about the chart. I'm talking
Is
about
that different?
the entire sheet.
It's called a chart, while the other one's called a sheet.
No, not to the bottom here. Not to the bottom here. I'm talking about the entire interface, the entire worksheet area. This entire worksheet area. What's the difference?
One is big and one is in an open area and one is a fixed something.
You're getting close. It's like it's literally night and day. It's like literally night.
The bar graph is displayed better.
No, this art. Let me go to a blank area then. There's nothing here. We ain't talking about the chart. We just talking about this general area here. What's the difference between this entire section here that you're seeing compared to this entire work area that you're
It's
seeing.
in rows and columns.
Exactly. That's the difference. It does not have any rows and columns. You see anybody seeing any rows and columns on this sheet here?
No.
No,
sir.
that's the difference. So, with that in mind, a chart sheet only contains a chart with no rows and columns. So that's the difference between a chart sheet and a worksheet. So worksheet is going to have rows and columns. Your sheet is going to have rows and columns. Your spreadsheet is going to have rows and columns. But your chart sheet is only going to have a chart and is going to have no rows and columns, because the only purpose of that chart sheet, as the name implies, is to put a chart on that sheet so that it can be displayed. That's the only purpose of it. Are we clear on that?
Yes, sir.
Amelina?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Alright. Anybody write in or move on?
So you can go back to the first paragraph.
So let me know when you finish. So Gayatri, as you just joined, we were looking at some terms that you need to understand. You need to understand what's a spreadsheet, what's a worksheet, what is a workbook, what is a chart sheet, and what is just a sheet. So 5 terms we looked at so far. I nearly had a heart attack. I thought it wasn't recording. So basically, always remember that a spreadsheet, always think of it as basically a book. This is supposed to be equal sign. Think of spreadsheet as a book. It has different pages, and those pages we call worksheets or sheets, and the entire collection of those worksheets or sheets is going to be called a workbook. Finish, Amelina?
No, sir. 1 minute.
Alright. Why it look like you're writing back everything?
Not really. Yeah, you could go to the next thing that you're reading.
Or you haven't wrote that either? It's basically the same thing, but summarize it.
Good night, sir.
Good night. Alright, Trinity, we basically looked at 5 terms so far, and this is just a summarization of those terms so far. Spreadsheet, worksheet, workbook, sheet, chart sheet. Melina?
Start finish, right?
Like you were waiting for me to ask?
No, the same time you talk, I'm gonna unmute.
Okay. Alright, so moving on to the next paragraph. Now, an Excel worksheet has over 1,000,000 rows, so you can take note of that, has over 1,000,000 rows that extend downward the worksheet, numbered from row 1. So basically the row starts at row 1. So as you guys can see right now, the row starts at row 1, and if you keep scrolling, it'll go over 1,000,000. It's 1,000,000 and something. I think 4,000 or 400,000 something around that area. Now the columns are around 16,384 columns. So the columns go from letter A to Z. So as you can see right now, we're starting at A, B, C, D. So we're going with the alphabet. But when we reach at Z, we start combining letters. So we go AA, and then BA, and then CA, and then DA, and so on. So they keep combining letters and incrementing those letters to get different columns. So the last column is somewhere around XYD. I think no. X A X X A X X A X 12. Somewhere around X as the last column, XFD. So if you want to take note of that, what is happening now? The very last column is XFD. So that's the very last column. And if you get some free time, you can actually we can actually search for it. It's 1,000,000 0 0 4,000 0 0. Let's see how far the it goes. If I increment this to 3, yeah. If I increment it to 4, increment it to 5, okay, so 4 is around 4,000, 8, still going, 9, no, somewhere between 48 and 49. Let's see how far it goes. $48,500. 800. No, too high. 600. No, out we near reach. Good. So that is the last column and the last row. So if you notice, it's just over 1,000,000 rows. As the paragraph mentioned, it's over 1,000,000 rows. So if you notice, we have 1,048,576 rows maximum in one worksheet. Please note this is only in one worksheet, and 16,384 columns. But remember, we're working with letters, so that's going to be XFD as the last one. So going back to the paragraph, so 1,000,000 rows, 16,384 columns. Now, a workbook, so that's for the columns and rows. And as I said, that's for each sheet. Each sheet has 1,000,000 rows and 16,000 columns. Each sheet. So the question now is, How much sheets can you have in a spreadsheet? How much sheets can you have in a workbook? Now, you can have a minimum of one sheet. Nothing's wrong with only having with one sheet in your workbook. So if I delete everything at the bottom here, if I delete all of the sheets, nothing is wrong with only having one sheet and putting everything inside of that one sheet. But how much can we have maximum now? We can have an unlimited number of sheets. We can have an unlimited number of sheets. But it's actually, technically it is unlimited, but it has a limit. Unlimited to a limit, basically. It's unlimited to a limit. Because what makes it unlimited is that it depends on the computer that you have. So like if you have an old computer, it's going to have a smaller number of sheets available. But if you got a more updated and newer version of a computer, it will get you more sheets than that older computer. So what limits the sheet basically? So this is restricted by the amount of memory available to store the Excel file. So basically, if your computer has a small memory, then that is going to limit how many sheets you can have open. If your computer has more memory, then that means you can open more sheets. It's that simple. You guys clear on that?
Yes, sir.
The rest of you clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Great. So that was our fourth point there. We just learned how many rows and column a worksheet has. And then lastly, how many sheets we can have in the workbook in total. It's unlimited, but it's restricted based on how much memory we have. Alright, if you guys are clear on all of that, anybody with any questions? No questions? Alright, so we're moving on to our next topic, and that is going to be cells, and more specifically, we are looking at what is an active cell. What is an active cell? Now, the active cell in the document window is highlighted with a darker border so that you can tell where the cursor is located in the worksheet. So, if we open a worksheet and we look at this worksheet, you're going to always notice there is a cell with a darker border. So if I click a cell, a darker border is going to appear. Click another cell, that darker border will appear. If I highlight a group of cells, a darker border will appear. That darker border, this green border, is what is called the active cell. The purpose of the active cell is to indicate where the cursor is located. That is the purpose of the active cell, to indicate where the cursor is located. So, the question we can ask ourselves now, what is the purpose of a cursor? So, for us to simplify this, to get an understanding, what's the purpose of a cursor? I have 3 lines right now. Now, if I were to press the number 1, can you tell me where it is going to appear?
In the second row between S and D.
Very good. The rest of you agree? Second row between S and D?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And why do you say that? Why do you agree with that?
Because that's where the cursor is.
Exactly. Simple as that. That is where the cursor is located, and we know that wherever the cursor is located, whatever we type is going to appear in that location. Now similarly, if you notice in Spreadsheet, we do not have a cursor that is blinking. Right now, we do not have a cursor that is blinking. So, what is indicating to us that we are going to work in a particular location is a cursor that is being highlighted in a darker border. So this is our cursor right now. So if we start to type something, we can expect it to appear in that location that has the darker border. So that's the purpose of the active cell, to indicate that is where we are working. Now if you notice, if I highlight a group of cells, there's always this top left cell, always a top left cell that is going to remain white. And basically if you start typing, information is always going to start from that top left cell. So even if you highlight a group of cells, and you're wondering where the information is going to appear, it's going to appear in that white area, that top left area. It always makes use of that top left area. So that there is the active cell. It has a darker border, and the purpose of it is to work as a cursor to show where you are working. Now the paragraph continues. You can move around the worksheet by using the arrow keys or with the vertical and horizontal scroll bar. So if for some reason you find it uncomfortable to use the mouse or the trackpad, you can actually select a cell and make it active, and then use the arrow key on the keyboard, and it will move the cursor. So can you guys try that and tell me if you get it to work? Make a cell active, use the arrow keys on the keyboard, and tell me if you get your cursor, your active cell, to move.
Yes, sir, it works.
Good. The rest of you have your computer?
Yes, sir, it works for me.
Good. Ameline and Gayatri?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Great. So, with that in mind, a lot of the things that we do in spreadsheets, we have what is called shortcut keys. Hence, that's why we can actually move the active cell with the arrow keys, because the time you're going to take to go back and forth from a mouse to keyboard, it's much easier on professionals to stay on the keyboard and do everything from the keyboard. So that way, they don't waste time going back and forth from the mouse. So that's why you're going to notice as we go through Spreadsheet, there's going to be a lot of shortcut keys that allow you to carry out tasks right from the keyboard. So you can use the keys to move around the active cell, and you're going to use the horizontal and vertical scroll bar to move from different rows and columns and so on. So your horizontal scroll bar, that's going to be the one at the bottom. That's going to show you the different columns. And then you have your vertical scroll bar, which is going to show you your different rows. So that's two ways you move around the document. But say for instance, once again, you don't want to click on these arrow here. You don't want to move the scroll bar. This is where using the arrow keys can come into play. Because if you hold down the right arrow, if you notice, it's going to keep going. It's going to keep changing columns all the time. It's going to keep going and keep moving, and you're going to keep seeing the next column. Same for the row also. And it could be easier in some persons, because we know some persons they have a difficulty with clicking and dragging and so on. So using these arrow keys can make it easier on them to travel around in the worksheet area. So you can move from different columns, rows, and so on. So whichever one you're comfortable with, If you're comfortable with clicking, if you think using the keyboard is much faster, you make use of that. You guys follow me so far?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Great. So next, once you have entered data into the active cell, Excel has several ways to complete the entry. Alright, before we get on to this next part, I want you guys to understand something. There is a difference between making a cell active and being inside of a cell. Currently, when I click on a cell, I am outside of the cell. All of this here, I am outside of that cell. So, when you double click on it, if you notice, you guys seen a cursor blinking? See that cursor?
Yes, sir.
So, that there is an indication you are inside of the cell. So whatever you type now, you can actually think of it like if you're inside a Word document now, you can move around this cursor, you can click anywhere you want, put the cursor wherever you want, type whatever you want, and so on. You're inside of this cell. You are working inside of this cell now. Now, I'm not sure if anybody noticed. Let me come out of the cell. What I want you to look at right now, look at the home ribbon. You notice everything has color. All of the options, they're available. They have color, they're all available, and so on. But look at it, keep looking at it. I'm gonna go inside of the cell and tell me what happens. What do you notice happened?
It gone.
It gone away.
Apparently.
So you can't do it. It becomes like black and white, or
Yeah.
you can't use it.
Right. So it becomes black and white. So in layman's term, it gone away. So we can't use them anymore. Well, some of them we can, but a majority of them we cannot use them. If we try to click on them, they won't work. So I'm gonna go back in. Yeah. So they're grayed out. The term is called grayed out. That's the more technical term, grayed out. So these here are called grayed out, meaning that you cannot use them anymore. So that is an indication you are working inside of a cell. So basically, when you're inside of a cell, you only have certain options available to you. But until you finish typing whatever you want to put inside of that cell and you complete the entry, then you can go back to that cell, not inside of the cell, but basically highlighting it, basically making it active. Then you can get the rest of settings at the top here. Then you can get the rest of options. And then you can go and make use of them. But you cannot make use of them when you are working inside of the cell. Why I'm mentioning this is because later on we're going to be learning everything that you see at the top here. And what I've noticed some students do is that they stay inside the cell and they try to use the options at the top here, and obviously it won't work. So I'm just letting you know that not everything is going to work when you're inside of the cell. What you have to do is complete the entry, and that's actually what we're looking at next. How do you complete the entry of entering data into a cell? So when I put data into the cell, what are the options do I have to complete the entry, complete that entering of data? Well, the one most popular key that you will be using is the enter key, and I'm pretty sure you're already using it. So you simply type something, you press enter, and it completes the entry of what you would have been typing. Now, what I want you to note is that where does the cursor go? Where does it make active next? When you press enter, the active cell goes down. So when you use the enter key, to complete your entry, the enter key moves the active cell downward. Now, why is this important? Why is this important to note? Well, as I said earlier, professionals, they do not want to go back and forth between the keyboard and the mouse. That takes up time. There was a study done, and they basically said that it takes 0.3 seconds. It takes roughly 0.3 seconds to go from keyboard to mouse. Now, if you think about it, if it takes 0.3 seconds, is 0.3 seconds a lot of time?
No.
No, that's not a lot of time. That's actually very fast. But if we add up a lot of 0.3s, then that's going to make a difference. So say for instance for the day, say I've been working on an assignment, and say 50 times or even 100 times I went back and forth, and obviously it might be more, but roughly 100 times I went back and forth between keyboard and mouse. Now if you multiply that 0.3 times 100, that's 30 seconds. Now if we say that we went back and forth 1,000 times, back and forth, and we know that happens a lot. We go back and forth between keyboard and mouse a lot when we're typing and doing work. Now say we do that 1,000 times. This is just one document. That's 300 seconds. Now if we take 300, how much minutes is this going to be? 5 minutes. Good. So that's going to be 5 minutes. So imagine you're working on one document and you go back and forth from keyboard to mouse 1,000 times inside this one document. That's 5 minutes of time you wasted going back and forth between keyboard and mouse. And that means in 5 minutes, or you could have used that 5 minutes for something else, to submit the assignment. Maybe it was midnight and you had to submit it before midnight. So working just on the keyboard saves time, but obviously you won't know how to do that right away. It takes time. Eventually, as you practice more over and over, you keep practicing, you'll get accustomed to using the keyboard and only the keyboard. I don't use only the keyboard, even though I'm teaching Spreadsheet. I don't use only the keyboard, but roughly like 50% of the time I'm on the keyboard alone. I try to stay on the keyboard alone whenever I'm in Spreadsheet. I would mostly use the arrow keys whenever I want to navigate instead of trying to go to the mouse, because that actually makes it a lot faster. So going back to the enter key to complete your entry, why is it important to note when you press enter the active key goes the active cell goes down, is because the other cell and the other keys to complete your cell entry takes the active cell in a different direction. So this one goes down if you press tab. So I'm going to type inside of this cell here, and if I press tab, it's going to go to the right. So if you notice, if I keep pressing tab, the active cell is going to go to the right hand side. So I'm pressing tab right now, and it's going to the right hand side. So tab takes you on the right hand side, takes the active cell to the right hand. Now what happens when you press shift tab? Any guesses? If tab takes you to the right, shift tab is going to take you to the
left.
Very good. Good. So that's going to take you to the left. So I'm going to go to the end here. I'm going to hold down shift. I'm going to press tab. So, and then you notice it takes me to the left here. So shift tab takes me to the left. Now, another thing to note, whenever you see key combinations, like for example we are seeing right now, it says shift plus tab. It's not that you are pressing shift and then tab right up, and then you press shift and then you press tab. No, it's not that. What you have to do, you have to hold shift. You keep holding shift. The plus means together. They have to be pressed together at the same time. So it's not that you quickly pressing them together at the same time. Yes, you can do that, but that's very hard to do. Even I don't do that. What I do is hold the shift key and then you press any other keys. So whenever you see a key combination like this here, two keys with a plus between it, it basically means you hold the first key. So in this case it's shift. You hold that shift key and then you press whatever key it mentions afterward. If it was CTRL plus whatever, that means you hold the CTRL key and then you press any other key that comes after. That's how you get that key combination. So can you guys try these three here and tell me if you get it to work? Try the enter key, try the tab, try the shift tab. Let me know if you get all three to work.
Yes, sir, they work.
Great.
Yes, sir.
Good.
Yes, sir.
Good.
Yes, sir.
Good. Now, whenever I tell you to do something, don't feel pressure that you have to do it as fast as possible. Take your time and do that task so that you can get to understand it and to know how to do it well. So that's enter, tab, and shift tab. Next, you have the arrow keys. So the arrow keys can allow you to go in any direction. So the arrow keys is actually only moving the cursor. So I guess that one should be excluded. Yeah, that's only moving the cursor. But this is also good to know that when you're inside of a cell, say for instance I spell this word wrong. Let me actually type in a word. So say for instance good morning, but I'm gonna spell that word wrong. Now what I've noticed some students do is that they would go to the cell, delete everything instead of trying to edit the information inside of it. So what we're trying to understand right now is how to edit this information inside of it. So you have the information inside, you double click on the cell and you enter the cell. Now you can notice the cursor is there. So if you're good with your mouse and you can precisely put your cursor directly where you need it to go, then it's okay to use your mouse to position the cursor exactly where it needs to go. But if you know you cannot do that, use the left and right arrow key so that the cursor goes to the right location. It goes right after the F. You press your backspace and you press it again and you correct the information that is inside of the cell. So when we are inside of a cell, we can use the arrow keys to move our cursor. When we are outside of the cell, it's basically the same thing. The cursor moves, right? But this is the active cell cursor. So the arrow key moves the cursor. It all depends on which cursor. The active cell cursor or the cursor that allows you to edit information inside of a cell. Are we following?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir,
Great. So the second to last option is to click another cell. So remember, we're still looking at different ways to complete the entry. So this second to last one is basically like if you're working inside of a cell and you want to quickly jump to the next cell that you want to work in. So say for instance I was working in this cell that has good morning and I want to go to another cell till over on the right hand side. I can just click on that cell right away and I get over there. and it start working. But one thing to note, clicking does not always work in all situations. For instance, if you just type in a word, it's going to work. For instance, I just type some letters there and I go and click on another cell. It complete the entry and made that cell active. But there's a situation where it will not work. That situation is when you are making a formula. Now, can anyone remember what starts a formula?
An equal sign.
Very good. An equal sign. Now, when you start a formula, what the system is expecting is that you put in the values that you want to calculate. So you can either type in a number, or what we've learned so far is that we type in the name of the cell. For example, A1. Now, Spreadsheet has a feature whereby you don't have to type in the cell. You simply click on the cell. So this is where clicking another cell is not going to work. This is where clicking another cell is not going to complete that cell entry, because what it's doing right now, it is trying to select a cell. Now, another thing to note is that what I've noticed is that some students, they enter this situation here, they go into the cell, they type in the name of this, they type in the equal sign, and they start clicking all over the place. Why? Because they want to come out of the cell. But obviously they can't come out of the cell because all they're doing is just selecting cells, just highlighting cells. Now, what you can do is delete the information and then you go and select the cell. Or a more simpler method is to, and this one you can use to any situation. Whenever you are inside of a cell and you want to come out of that cell, you have a key at the very top left with the letters ESC on it. ESC. That is called the escape key. So ESC, that is the escape key. Whenever you're inside of a cell and you select or whatever you're doing in that cell and you want to come out of that cell, you can press the escape key and that's going to take you out of that cell. So can you guys try that? Let me know if it works. Type something inside of a cell, stay inside of that cell, but when you press the escape, it comes out of that cell. It doesn't save anything. Basically, like it evacuates you out of that cell. So see if you get that to work.
Yes, it works.
Good.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Good.
Yes, sir.
Great. So that is useful. Like for instance, you're trapped inside of a cell. Like that's that very situation there. You have the equal sign, you're clicking all over the place. You're basically trapped inside the cell. What you do, you press the escape key. Now there's another situation where you might want to know that you can use the escape key. Say for instance you have a sentence. You have a not only a sentence, you have a cell with information inside of it. So you have a lot of information inside of it. And all of this is very important information. So all of this information right now in this cell here is very important information. Now what can happen, what can accidentally happen is that I accidentally press a number. And if you notice, everything in that cell just completely disappears. Now, if you complete the entry, obviously you got undo. But you shouldn't always depend upon undo. Undo is not a one-time fix-all thing. Sometimes it doesn't actually work. So don't always trust in it. So in this situation here, what you can do, you have all of this important information in this cell. say for instance you accidentally start typing over this cell here and it deletes the old information, but you want back that old information. Simply press the escape key and it takes you out of editing that cell. So the escape key allows you to not complete the entry. So what we've been learning all this time is how to complete the entry. We use the enter key, we use tab, we use shift, we use arrow key, we click another cell, whatever the situation, we use those keys to complete the entry. But you will have a situation where you do not want to complete that entry, and the key you're going to use is the escape key. That key is going to take you out of that cell, so that whatever you were typing, if whatever mistake you would have made in that cell and you're still in that cell, is going to take you out without saving anything. It's going to take you out without completing that entry. Are you guys clear on that? You guys following?
Sir, can you go over that part
So
one more time?
what I'm saying, all of this information inside of this cell here is very important information. Remember, you don't want to remove any part of this information inside of this cell here. So, but what can happen is that you accidentally make the cell active and you accidentally press some keys on the keyboard. Now, when you do that, what happens is that it types over that information. It replaces that information. So, if I press enter, if you notice, I do not have that important information anymore. It's now gone. Now, as I said, you can use the undo, obviously, to get back that information. But you don't want to always depend upon that undo. What you can do is that if you do go and accidentally type something inside of a cell and you don't want to save what you would have typed, you do not want to complete what you would have typed, you don't want to replace what you would have typed, press the escape key. That's going to take you out of that cell from whatever you would have typed in. Is that better?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right,
Yes, sir.
the rest of you clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, good. Any questions? Anything bothering you? Anything from what we looked at here? So enter takes you down, tab takes you to the right, shift tab takes you to the left, arrow key depends on where you are, it moves that cursor. You can select another cell, or you can press the enter button on the formula bar. So we should know that the formula bar is at the top here, and I think we looked at this already, or I'm not sure if we did, but the formula bar is linked to the cell. I'm going to go to another sheet. So that was just a situation there. I was inside of this cell here, and I was selecting this plus here, and it wasn't allowing me to do anything. It wasn't allowing me to create another sheet. So I had to come out of that cell, escape, in order to basically create that other sheet there. Alright, so what we're looking at right now is this formula bar, this long white bar at the top here. Now, when I'm typing inside of this cell, look at the formula bar. What you guys notice happen?
So that means that you typed are in there.
Good. Whatever you typed in the cell appeared in the formula bar. Now, I'm going to make this cell active, and I'm going to go to the formula bar. So notice my cursor is currently in the formula bar, and I'm going to type something in the formula bar. And what you guys notice? it appeared inside the cell, right? So what that means is that the two are linked to each other. Whatever is inside the cell is inside of the formula bar. Whatever is inside of the formula bar is inside of the cell. Exactly the same thing. Just that sometimes they might have a different view. Later on we're going to learn what's that difference. But basically the exact same thing you can see in both of them. So what that means is that that's the final point here. You click the enter button on the formula bar. So remember, we're still looking at ways to complete your entry. So what some persons can do is enter information into a cell through the formula bar. Now if you notice, say for instance we have a lot of information. Say we have all of this information here. Because it's only because we don't have information that we can actually see what we're typing. Now say for instance this small cell that we have here, yes, we can make it bigger to see everything, but there are some situations where you might not want to make it bigger. So we're going to keep it small for now. Now notice I'm going to type some information into this cell, and if you notice it starts overlapping the other cells. Now I finished typing, I'm going to press enter to complete, but I'm not seeing everything. This is where the formula bar can come into play, because normally if you want to see everything you would double click, go back into it, and then you would see the information. So once you're inside of the cell you can see everything, but maybe you might just want a preview of it, and that's where the formula bar can come into play. So you just have to make that cell active and it's going to show you all of the information. That is actually why it is so long, so that you can see all of the information from that formula bar instead of you having to widen the cell to see that information. You guys clear on that?
Yes, sir.
Alright, so we are okay, so that's everything about completing the entry to enter data. So what we're looking at right now is we already looked at the interface, we already looked at was spreadsheet, was worksheet, and all of those terms. What we're looking at right now is that when you type data into a cell, how do you complete entering that data? When you type a formula 1 equal 1 plus 2, how do you complete it? You can use the enter key, you can use the arrow key, you can use tab, you can use any one of those keys to complete the entry when you are typing in data. So these are all the keys here. Now after you would have finished typing in all of that information, we have to learn now what are the different ways to edit those information. You finish typing in all of your data. So say for instance we finished typing in all of this information here. Now how can we go about editing it? What's the different methods of editing it? That's the next thing we're looking at. But are you guys clear on all of this here? What's the active cell and what's the different methods of completing the entry?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Amelie and Gayatri?
Yes, sir.
Great.
Yes, sir.
So how do we edit the information in that cell now? So you have information in the cell. Now as I mentioned already, what I noticed some students would do is that they would go and start typing over the information that they already have, and that's actually a method of editing that is called type over. So the first method of editing is to type over the cell's current content. Whatever is inside the content the cell, you actually do not need to delete it. You simply start typing over that cell, and what happens is that it deletes what was there already and replaces it with the new data. So it deletes what was already there and replaces it with the new data. So let me just show you. So as you just saw, I had this long word here. I can make it longer, but I already have this word here. So I'm going to simply make this cell active, and instead of using the delete key or backspace, I'm just going to press the number 1. And if you notice, it deleted everything and it's now replaced it with the number 1. That is called type over. So I have 1 there, I just press the number 4 and I press enter, it typed over that 1. I type in 100, it just replaced that 4 there. So that is the type over editing. So try that, tell me if you get it to work. Type something into a cell and then try to type over that information.
Yes, sir, it works.
Good.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Great. So that's the type over mode there now. Now what's the next one? The next method of editing is to double click. Now double click is when you want to modify the contents, the data that you already have. So you can say that type over is when you want to replace what you have. So say for instance, I don't care that I have this long number inside of this cell. I don't care what it is. Whatever's inside there doesn't matter to me anymore. So just entering the number 5 and replacing it, that's fine. That's replacing it. That's the type over. Now that long number there, now say for instance, that's a very important number. But I made a mistake. It wasn't supposed to start with a 9. It was supposed to start with an 8. So this is where double clicking to modify is going to come into play. This different form of editing. Now, instead of you typing over the entire number, like what some students would do, they would go and type over the entire number. That wastes time. What you should be doing is trying to edit what is inside of the cell, trying to modify. So you double click on it and you put your cursor to whatever location you want and you delete that information, use the backspace key just like a normal Word document, and you add in your new information. So try that, see if you get it to work. Type a long word or a long number into a cell, double click on that cell and try to edit a part of that cell. Let me know if you get through.
Yes, sir, it works.
Great.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You missing somebody or everybody say yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So that there is double click to modify. Now the last one is to either use the delete key or backspace key and then you start typing in the new information. It's kind of like the type over, but you can use the keys. So you have the information and you press backspace. Now what I want you to notice is that the two of them, they do the same thing. They basically do the same thing, but one has a slight difference. So look what happens. I have this information in this cell. When I press the backspace, notice the cursor appears inside of the cell. So when I press backspace, the cursor appeared in the cell. Now I put back the information. When I press the delete key, it deletes the information, but it does not place a cursor inside of the cell. Now, that is not of any importance. That is not of any significance. That's not any major breakthrough or anything. But it's still important to note that what happens, that when you press backspace, it puts the cursor inside the cell. It deletes everything, puts the cursor inside of the cell, whereas the delete key just deletes the information. But obviously that doesn't affect anything, because whether you press backspace and it puts the key and it puts the cursor inside the cell, or you press delete and you do a type over, it still does the same thing. But what you need to remember is what happens when you delete the information. When you press backspace, the cursor goes into the cell, and when you press delete, it does not go into the cell. So you can try it out. Type some information to a cell, try both backspace and delete key. Tell me if you see the difference. One has the cursor in the cell, one does not put the cursor.
Yes, sir.
Good.
Yes, sir.
Mhm.
Yes, sir.
Great. So that is how you edit the information. So we looked at how to put the information into the cell. So firstly, we actually looked at how to make the cell active. You basically select the cell that's making it active. Then we looked at when you type in the information in the cell, what methods you have to complete that entry. And then lastly, after you finish editing it, what methods do you have for editing that information? After you finish entering the information, how do you edit what you would have entered? So we have type over, double click, and delete. Anybody has to write anything? Or move on? Yes, no, move on.
You can move on for me.
Alright. Nobody else saying anything? So, our next topic is cell reference. Let's see. Types of data. Let's take a cell. Yeah, our next topic is cell reference. Now, cell reference are the combination of column letter and row number. So, cell reference refers to the combination of column letter and row number. So, for example, the upper left cell of worksheet is A1. Examples of other cell reference: Z25, BC304, GG100. So, the cell reference is basically the cell name. So, we have a lot of terms here. You can either call it, let me type it in Spreadsheet. So you can call it the cell, you can call it a cell name, you can call it cell reference, you can call it cell identifier. What more? There's actually a lot more names you can use, but they all basically refer to the same thing. They're all referring to the name of the cell. That's what they're referring to. So whenever you hear cell reference or any one of these terminologies, cell name, cell identifier, you would hear the term address, cell address. Those all refer to basically the same thing, which is the name of the cell. And the name of the cell is always a combination of column letter and row number. That is the name of a cell. So if you notice, with this cell that I'm currently in, it is a combination of column G and row 8. If I go to another cell, it's a combination of column J and row 4. I go to another one, combination of column L and row 3. And what's important to note, which one comes first? The column always comes first. So in any cell name, doesn't matter which cell, in any cell name, the column letter is always going to be mentioned first, and then the row number is going to be mentioned after that. So it's a combination of column letter and row number. And remember, the row number is always for column letter is always first. You guys clear on that?
Yes, sir.
Anyone with any questions? Any comments? Anything you notice? Any feedback? Alright, so we can look at our final topic for tonight, types of data. I know we are looking at a lot of information, so I don't want us to get overloaded with information. So we can take types of data as our final topic for tonight. Now, whenever you're putting information into spreadsheet, they fall under two types of data. There are two types of data, labels and values. And it's very simple. Labels are non-numeric data. Anything that is non-numeric. What does non-numeric mean?
It doesn't have numbers?
Exactly. It does not have numbers. It has nothing to do with numbers. Actually, it can have numbers, but it's not being viewed as a number. It's not being considered as a number. So, labels are non-numeric data that will not be used in any calculations. So, technically, a number can be treated as a non-numeric data. Technically, a number can be treated as non-numeric when it is not used in any calculation. For example, are there any numbers we do not use in calculation? Can you think of any example? What numbers would you never calculate, that there is no point in calculating?
0 plus 0.
Good. That's a good example. But I'm talking about information that we have as numbers. What information do we have as numbers? Alright, let me give you an example. You have your phone number. Isn't your phone number made of numbers? So 666-6666. That's a cell phone number. And it's made up of numbers. Now, would you add my cell phone number to this cell phone number? Would that make sense to do?
No, sir.
No, that won't make sense to do. You can. Nothing is stopping you. Nothing is stopping you from adding two cell phone numbers together. But it doesn't make sense. There is no point in adding two cell phone numbers together. So, even though they are numbers, there's certain situations whereby certain numbers will not be used in any calculation. Hence, they are going to be treated as labels, which are called non-numeric data. Are we clear on that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now, give me some other examples. What's some other numbers that doesn't make no sense to calculate?
Sir, your address?
Good. So your address has a lot number. That makes no sense in calculating. What else?
Sir, the number on a barcode.
Good.
Plate number.
Number plate. Good. You have your ID card number. You have your passport number. Basically, most ID verification numbers, they're actually numbers. Checks have numbers. Your Visa card has a number. Most identification purposes for anything that's used for identification has numbers inside of it, and it does not make sense to do any calculations on them. Hence, they are called labels, which are non-numeric data. Now, that's the first type of data. Our second type of data is values, and this is all the numeric data. So, all of your negative numbers, your positive numbers, your whole numbers, your decimal numbers, whatever number, they are going to be called a value. So those are two types of data, labels and values. So we have some examples here. So labels are going to be mainly words, tag, skipping, marbles, hopscotch, game. Values are going to be strictly numbers. The paragraph continues. We're going more into labels. So in Excel, any data that begins with a letter, let me change the highlighter. Once it begins with a letter or includes a letter, it is going to be treated as a label. So once it starts with a letter, once it has a letter inside of it, even if it has numbers, it is going to be treated as a label. Now, this part here is important to note. Labels are left align by default, and they are not included in calculations. Labels are left align and they are not used in calculations. Now we know in arithmetic and more advanced form of maths, we use different letters to calculations and so on. But in our case here, we cannot add A and A. We cannot add B and C. So let's look at this first part here. Labels are left align. What does left align mean? Anybody? Anybody know what's left align? When you do left, yeah, go ahead, Africo.
That means that it's placed on the left hand side.
Good. But the question now is, when something is left aligned, left of what in spreadsheet?
Left of the column.
Good try. Anybody else want to try? Left of what? So let me type something in. What do you think? Left of what?
Sorry, the number?
Try again. What is it in?
The cell?
End of the cell.
Cell. So when you're working in a Word document, whenever you're working in a Word document, the alignment is in relation to the edge of the page. The alignment is in relation to the edge of the page. So if it's left aligned, it's going to the left of the page. If it's right aligned, it's going to the right of the page. If it's center aligned, it's going to the center of the page. Now in spreadsheet, we're not looking at the entire spreadsheet. Whenever we are working inside of a cell. So, whenever we carry out alignment, it is for that cell alone. So, right now I typed in this letter T, so the T is left aligned to this cell here in particular, cell B3. It's only inside of this cell here that it is left aligned. Now, the next part says that it cannot be used in any calculation. So we know that if we type in 1 plus 1 equal C2 plus C3, which is basically 1 plus 1, we get 2. Now, if I got a 1 at the top here, and I do equal B2 plus T, it's not going to work. We get a value error. Because obviously we have a letter here, so until we change it to a number, then we are going to get a result. So we cannot calculate letters in spreadsheets. You guys clear on this here?
Yes, sir.
Anybody write in or move on?
Move on.
Alright. Now values now. Now, if the first thing you type in a cell is a number, Excel is going to consider it a value. Now note, values are right aligned inside of the cell and we use them for calculations. So, values are right aligned. Labels are left aligned. So those two pieces of information, very important to remember. So as you can see right now, this letter is on the left and all of these numbers are on the right hand side. What I can do, I can add in some borders so that you can see them. So notice the border highlighting the cell. So notice the T is on the left hand side of the cell and all of the numbers are on the right hand side. So please remember that all labels, so even if I type in T0, notice even though it has numbers inside of it, the fact that it has a letter, even if that letter is in the middle, it starts with a number. So notice it starts with a number, but the fact that it has a letter inside of it is going to be treated as a label. But if I take out this letter, you notice it went on the right hand side. So what does that mean? It's now being treated as a number. So anytime you put a letter, any symbol, doesn't only have to be a letter, any symbol, notice it automatically went over in the left hand side because it's being treated as a label. You guys clear on that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Great. So, for example, a sum of money would be considered a label, so a sum of money, a value. However, a telephone number, so this is what I was telling you guys earlier, a telephone number will not be considered a value because we do not use this type of data in any form of calculation. Now, if you do not want a cell's numeric contents to be treated as a value, then entry must begin with an apostrophe or the cell can be formatted for text. So we got two pieces of information here. So say you type in a number and you do not want it to be treated as a value, you do not want it to be treated as a number, then you can start the entry with an apostrophe or you format it for text. So let me show you how these two are done. So let me go to another sheet. So I type in the number 1. I do not want it to be treated as a number 1. So I go back into the cell and I simply place an apostrophe, a single apostrophe, in front of that number, and I press enter, and notice it went to the left hand side of that cell. But one thing to note is that it actually does not stop it from being used in any calculation, because I've actually tried it. I notice I'm going to try it right now. It actually does not stop it from being used in any calculation. It's just that the system is just now viewing it as a label. It's not really being treated as a label. So I need you to understand that the system is viewing it as a label, but it's still being treated as a value. Now, even though it might appear as though it's something that doesn't make sense, it's something that is not working, for exam purposes, please remember it for that if at any point in the exam they ask you how to make a cell's numeric value to not be treated as a value, how to make a number to not be treated as a value, the answer is going to be start the cell with an apostrophe. That's the answer. Are we clear on that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And the final method is to format it for text. So how do we do that now? So notice this number here. Now if you notice at the top you have this word general. So you have this word general here, and right next to it has an arrow. So when you click on that, we have some formatting options here, and we should have an option of text at the very bottom, and if I select that, notice it places it on the left hand side. So both of them are being they're being viewed as text, but in reality they're still numbers and they're still being treated as numbers. But it's just important to note how to make the system view them as a label. Now notice this part here of the paragraph. It says that this will prevent the number from being used in numeric calculation. And obviously, we just saw, and as we can see right now, it is not preventing anything. It's not preventing any calculation. So, it's not something that is actually working. So I'm not sure why it's still in the textbook, or maybe years ago it was actually working and the company Microsoft removed the feature. I'm not sure what happened to that, but just note that it actually does not work. But still note for exam purposes, what are the options you have to make a number be treated as text. So we have some other examples here. A year. Examples of text formats are a year, such as 2018, identification number, telephone number. These numbers, we do not use them in any form of calculation. Now lastly, what does the term default mean? Default basically means automatic. What happens automatically? So, like for instance, if you enter a room, what happens by default? What happens? The light turns on, the light stays off. That was what happens automatically. When the sun sets, what happens? If the place gets dark, that's what happens automatically. Lights come on, that's what happens automatically. So, why we're mentioning this is that it's basically what we already covered. Whenever you enter a number, the correct terminology is that it defaults to the right side. It defaults to a right line. And whenever you enter a label, a non-numeric letter, a non-numeric data, text and so on, it defaults to the left side. it defaults to a left align, so it automatically happens. But that does not mean you cannot change the alignment. So please take note of that. That does not mean you cannot change the alignment. So even though this number is on the right hand side, you can still left align it. Nothing is stopping you. But what you're learning right now, what you're trying to understand right now, is that when you enter it for the first time, what part of the cell does it go by default? What happens automatically? Numbers go to the right hand side automatically, and letters go to the left hand side automatically. That's what you need to remember. So, are you guys clear on all of that? Any questions?
No, sir. No questions.
Nathan really wants to sleep right now. Alright, so to review what we would have looked at tonight, we looked at quite a few terms. Very important for you to remember the difference between all of them. We looked at what is a spreadsheet, we looked at what is a worksheet, we looked at what is a workbook, we looked at what is a chart sheet, what is a sheet. We looked at how many rows we have, we looked at how many columns we have, how many sheets we have. We looked at what is the active cell, how to complete entries, how to edit your entries. We looked at what is a cell reference. We looked at the types of data, labels and values. And then finally, we looked at what does it mean when something is default. Alright, last round, any questions before we depart?
No, sir.
Alright.
No, sir.
Questions going once, questions going twice. Sold to no questions. Alright, if no questions, that was it for tonight. Enjoy the rest of your night. See you tomorrow.
Bye, sir.
Goodbye.
Bye, sir.
Goodbye.